Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about some incredible news for Nintendo Switch 2 that happened yesterday, the night of Summer Games Fest, most of which happened during the presentation. However, something very big happened afterwards that's also really exciting. We have some pretty huge games that are coming to Nintendo Switch 2, and how each of these are being handled is some pretty darn exciting stuff here. I am totally pumped. However, there is something we talked about yesterday. Multiple people reported that they had heard Nintendo would have a presence at Summer Games Fest. And they did. But the way it was suggested would perhaps lead us to believe that there could be some first-party announcements. And while Nintendo certainly did have a presence, the Switch 2 was clearly a big part of Summer Games Fest, not in the way we expected. And so people have some things to say about that. And so we're going to be getting into that. We're going to be getting into the implications of the other teases and the Direct that supposedly is happening next week on Tuesday, even more apparently, but also these huge game announcements for Nintendo Switch 2 that have me so stoked. They're very, very exciting. I'm very pumped to talk about these, and so that's what we're getting into today. So Christopher Dring had indicated that Nintendo may be present at Summer Games Fest. And then Nintendo Prime had also said something similar. As we see here, per Christopher Dring, Summer Games Fest, Nintendo may be there. Nintendo Prime had said they will be in a big way, not maybe. Okay, so would they be available in a big way? And in my opinion, they were. However, there weren't first-party announcements. Nintendo Prime had also said this a little bit beforehand. Adding hype to my live reaction in the Summer Games Fest show tomorrow, I have now been told by 3 separate sources that for the first time in the event's history, Nintendo's partaking and will show something. This implies a first-party announcement, which isn't quite what we got. Again, we got some exciting stuff, which we'll be getting into. Very exciting stuff, to be clear. This is a very big deal thing here, but not quite that. But then there was also Attack the Backlog, who had said something as well, and we'll be getting into his response to the lack of the first-party announcement. But here's Nintendo Prime's. Welp, certainly did myself in, didn't I? No. I wasn't trying to yank anyone's chains. No, it's not a joke. Nintendo is part of Summer Games Fest, just not the show itself. I texted one of my sources during the show to ask what's up. He said, days of play. Well, that does me no good. Or you. So, lesson learned. Never share anything I'm told ever again. I can't really say anything other than sorry for sharing things I was told, and I am sorry if you are hurt or misled. That's it. That's all I got really. I'm sure I'll get dunked on for years to come, even harder than usual. I deserve it. See you all next week for the Direct. And so at least Nintendo Prime here is owning up to sharing this information when it was wrong. I do 100% believe that he was told this by these sources. However, I do think there's also room for misinterpretation, and it looks like that is what happened here. We also have ATB, who has an apology as well, who indicated he had heard something in terms of Nintendo being involved with Summer Games Fest. And so this is what he said. Well, I always promised myself that when I got my first leak wrong, I'd step away, and so I'll do that now. If the trust is affected, there's little point in continuing. I've been very lucky and consistent, but I take trust very serious and don't like to risk giving bad info and disappointing people. So for me, whilst I'd like to think I've been extremely reliable with everything I've ever put out, it's probably best to leave with that record. I was only told Nintendo would be at Summer Games Fest and nothing more, and ordinarily, I wouldn't have said anything as it wasn't enough info, but hearing others with similar info made me come forward and reject my gut feeling. Big mistake. I let myself and others get excited. I apologize again. I'll leave you with being the only one to leak the Final Fantasy Revelation name and say enjoy the Nintendo Direct on Tuesday. Not a bad way to go. It's been fun, friends. So, my friend ATB Attack the Backlog is saying here this is going to be his last leak because finally he's been wrong. And we've been talking about how Attack the Backlog's track record has been so good. He leaked the Adventures of Elliot. He's leaked the dates for so many different partner showcases and other Nintendo Directs. He's leaked things about the Final Fantasy Remake series, including this recent one, where he did actually tease the title for Final Fantasy that would be revealed at Summer Games Fest, which will be the Revelation. That's the subtitle for Final Fantasy Remake here, the third installment. That's it right there. He was indicating that that was the tease, and so he's leaving us with this final leak and that the Nintendo Direct is on Tuesday, which other people have been saying, but I guess we'll find out on Tuesday if this is happening. So, of course, a grain of salt, but yeah, this is their apologies. Both of them, I don't think, had any bad intentions. I do think this is just the nature of the beast, as I feel like I talk about with frequency, that these things should be taken with a grain of salt. You don't know exactly how it's going to go. It's not that they're necessarily lying. You look at their track record, you consider their credibility, and things change. There's room for misinterpretation. There's leak bait. There's a lot of different reasons to explain why something may not quite happen in the way we're initially led to believe. That said, some huge things did happen at Summer Games Fest and a little bit afterwards relating to Nintendo Switch 2, and it's actually great news for the Nintendo Direct, and it looks like some of my Nintendo Direct predictions are kind of coming true as well. So 3 games were shown off at Summer Games Fest that I am absolutely hyped for, like over the moon hyped. Let's start with a show opener. Resident Evil Veronica. The remake that's been teased and leaked and rumored. It's happening. We got our first trailer. It's coming out in 2027. It looks phenomenal. I love the direction they're taking with this. I never actually played Code Veronica. It's one of the few Resident Evils I haven't played, but I am a huge Resident Evil fan, and leading up to Requiem, I was playing through a lot of them, falling back in love with the series, and Resident Evil is now on Switch 2. Requiem was incredible. Actually, Resident Evil Requiem is my favorite game on Switch 2 so far this year. It's one of the best experiences, and it's a great demonstration of how modern AAA games can play wonderfully on the Nintendo Switch 2. Like, it's a dream, truly. It really is one of the best games you can play on the console. And if that's how games are going to be moving forward, I have full confidence that third-party support is going to be incredible, as we have been seeing with other games as well. But so Veronica's confirmed, coming out 2027, and yes, they did say also for Nintendo Switch 2. That is there. So right off the bat, confirmed, Veronica coming to Nintendo Switch 2 next year. Now, my prediction, if we go back to my Nintendo Direct predictions from a couple days ago, is that we'd be getting announcements for the Resident Evil remakes. I was not referring to Veronica, but I did kind of assume Veronica would come after these other remakes. So now that Veronica has been announced, though, there's an opportunity, more so I would argue, to put out 2 through 4, get the remake series out on Switch 2 leading up to Veronica. So while Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remakes have yet to have been confirmed for Switch 2, I would say this bodes really well that they're going to be putting them on the console before Veronica comes out. And if I'm not mistaken, usually Resident Evil games come out in the first half of the year, so I don't think Veronica's far off here, it looks like. Maybe I'm off of that, we'll see, but they are telling us 2027, so considering that we're already almost into the second half of 2026, I don't think we'd be waiting that long before we get these other Resident Evil remakes in lead up to Veronica on Switch 2. Now, before getting to the other announcements, though, I just want to point out about Veronica itself. I actually kind of like what's going on here, in the sense that it looks like they're following up the Requiem formula, because we see that Claire is back in her starring role, and it's in a first-person perspective, very much like Grace in Requiem. However, there's another character that's a really big deal to Veronica, and that is her brother, Chris. So Chris may be taking on the role of Leon in this game, and so that's probably going to be the third-person, more action-oriented elements, following the same formula as Requiem, which I personally absolutely loved. And while I'm a big fan of Leon, Leon's my favorite character in the Resident Evil series, and we've been getting a lot of Leon love lately, I do want to see a little bit more of Chris. I feel like we haven't gotten a modern depiction of Chris that shows him in a really positive, badass light as well. And so this is going to be his opportunity here. So that's really exciting. I mean, Requiem did kind of tease what's going on with Chris at the end, and so we're going to get to see Chris here. Obviously, this is in the past, but this could also be a setup for more later on as well. So very excited about this. Love the direction. Resident Evil on Switch 2, it's going, the train's going. It's very, very exciting stuff. But continuing with Capcom stuff here, during the show, we saw an amazing trailer for Monster Hunter Wilds Ascension. The expansion is coming. I talked about this in my predictions that we might be seeing this soon. Of course, my predictions were specifically for the Direct. However, it does make sense they would announce this at Summer Games Fest because this would be beyond just Nintendo here. And within that first trailer, they did not confirm that Monster Hunter Wilds is finally coming to Switch 2, but later in the evening, they did. Here, officially on the Monster Hunter page, Monster Hunter Wilds is currently in development for Nintendo Switch 2. We'll have more info to share, including the release date, in the future. We might see this in the upcoming Nintendo Direct. We may see this game running on Nintendo Switch 2 with a timetable here. Ascension, the expansion which they showed off, is coming out 2027. That may be the timetable for this Switch 2 version. They may be planning for Monster Hunter Wilds to come out on Switch 2 alongside the expansion. Maybe they might want it to come out before the expansion so people can play through the original campaign and then jump into the expansion afterwards. That's a possibility here. My prediction is that they would have come out pretty close together or alongside. We are hearing about the expansion and the Switch 2 version at the same time, so I feel pretty good about my prediction about Monster Hunter Wilds, although technically it's not in the Nintendo Direct, but if they talk about this in the Nintendo Direct, give us a little bit more of an update, then that would be the case. Now, looking at Ascension, disclaimer, I haven't played through Wilds yet. I've been thinking about waiting for the Switch 2 version because I do like playing Monster Hunter portably. I am a big Monster Hunter fan, but usually on Nintendo, although I did enjoy Worlds on PlayStation. But still, looking at the gameplay, it looks like they're kind of following a little bit of a trope that we've been seeing over some games lately, where you have the first big game that's very open, and then that follow-up is going to the skies. So we saw that with Horizon. Obviously, we saw that from Breath: The Tears of the Kingdom. Now, this is a DLC, but a huge DLC, as they've been touting. Or rather, a huge expansion. So they're really building this up here. This might be one of the biggest expansions we've ever seen. But they're going to the skies here. We're seeing a lot of updrafts. We're seeing a lot of sky islands here. It looks awesome. What they're doing with the weapons here and some sort of turbo boosting looks really, really cool. So I'm getting very, very hyped for this, and I'm excited to play this on Nintendo Switch 2. It's finally official. It's coming. I know a lot of people doubted it, but people just like to doubt Nintendo and what their consoles are capable of. But if you just look at what we've seen from third-party games on Switch 2 so far, we've been seeing some very impressive stuff. Capcom has been putting out AAA games at 60 frames per second on the Switch 2, such as Requiem. So my belief here is that they're only going to continue to get better with the hardware, find more ways to optimize and push things. And Wilds, hopefully by this point, will be well optimized, will run well, and be a great version on Switch 2. So I'm over the moon hyped. I love Resident Evil. I love Monster Hunter. They're some of my favorite non-Nintendo series out there. But there's one more game we got to talk about that is perhaps one of the more exciting closers to Summer Games Fest, and that is Revelations, a game, or the subtitle of it, leaked by Attack the Backlog, perhaps one of his final leaks. And this is also coming to Switch 2, as we already knew beforehand, before they had announced the official title of this one. But we also know it's coming out day and date. It's coming out at the exact same time. And so this is a huge deal. It's an ambitious game, an amazing looking game. I love what I'm seeing here. It looks incredible. And it's coming on Nintendo Switch 2. People really enjoyed Remake on Switch 2. Rebirth is looking great, and this third version looks awesome, even though we haven't seen Switch 2 gameplay yet, but we know it's coming out day and date with the other versions. And this is just extremely good news here. Sure, there were a few kind of sizzle reel commercials for Nintendo Switch 2 of some smaller third-party titles, but these new big announcements, Veronica, Monster Hunter Wilds Ascension, Final Fantasy VII, Revelation. To see these huge titles, some of the biggest announcements at the show, with that Switch 2 logo, this is the new era. This is the new time. Third parties, the big AAAs, not only are they coming, they're coming out day and date, on time, and they're great quality versions. My friends, these are the exciting times. This is a golden era here. There's been a lot of negativity surrounding Switch 2 online, because if you account for third-party stuff, the lineup has been absolutely stellar. Like, maybe you want to make the argument that what Nintendo has offered from a first-party perspective hasn't been as strong as that first year of Switch 1. There's a debate to be had because Nintendo's been pretty consistent with stuff so far. If you account for the third-party things, well, I think you gotta side with Switch 2. Like, there's just a really great lineup here. Games are running well on the console, considering what it is, a hybrid device. And so I'm just pumped. I'm pumped for my Switch too. I'm pumped for these awesome games. But you know, to look at a little bit more of a silver lining here of some of these teases not really being first-party announcements, this does support the idea that Nintendo still has a lot to show off at the Nintendo Direct. Nintendo's holding back on their own first-party stuff here, their bigger things, including the Dustblood, which a lot of people thought we might see here. That's going to be in the Direct. Ocarina of Time Remake, we've heard about that. We're going to see more Star Fox, I assume. Fire Emblem, Splatoon Raiders, maybe something from Monolith Soft, given that recent potential tease we discussed a couple days ago. Like this supposed Direct that we're hearing is happening on Tuesday, I'm just going to assume it's going to happen at some point next week just to offer a little bit of flexibility there, because we know Nintendo sometimes moves things around, but supposedly it's happening next week, so not having any really big announcements specifically from Nintendo's first-party offerings, I would say bodes well for what's to come. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.